get started. So I hope you guys did well. Jeremiah 18 through 35, right? What you went through? Good. Okay. Sort of, kind of. I want you to get a flavor for the message. So it's not that I'm expecting you to meticulously go verse by verse, but just hearing the overall story.
I got to 30, but I do understand what you said where there's a lot in the chapter.
Yeah. There's a little bit more in these chapters, right? So we'll talk through some things tonight. We'll pray first, and then we will I'd like to hear what you got, what questions and things that caught your attention were. So be thinking on that as we pray. Anything prayer-wise y'all need? All right. Let's see. Next week, I will be giving out midterms, so they won't be due till like a week or two later. I remember because we have March is weird. We got spring break and all that different stuff. So, yeah, your midterm is going to be 10 question, like short answer essay-ish questions. So you could go as short or as long as you want to, as long as you get the answer right. As long as you, and it's really like it's. Some of the questions are going to be like, describe to me a biblical theme of Babylon. So what is Babylon? What's it represented as? How is it developed throughout the Bible? Things that we've talked about like that. So you'll just be asked to kind of remark on that. So again, that could be a paragraph or that could be a page that you write on it. It's up to you. As long as you feel like you've gotten a good cohesive answer,
So minimum paragraph or?
I'm not going to put minimum. I just want you to if the idea is kind of like if somebody in your church, your congregation asked you, hey, I keep seeing Babylon. Explain that to me.
Bad.
Yeah.
No bueno.
Correct. No, but being able to give a good directed answer. I want you to explain it. I don't want you to just regurgitate what I've said, but I want you to be able to explain it in your own words. Does that make sense?
So technically, Iraq was part of Babylon between the Euphrates and the Tigris.
Yeah. And if you go there now, it's a heap of dust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Anyways,
anyways,
I've been on the Euphrates.
Do what?
I actually have been
Really?
on the dam at the Euphrates.
That's pretty wild, man.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's just a river.
Just a river. All right, let's pray. Start. Father, thank you for letting us be together tonight. Thank you for your word that you've preserved for centuries, that we may know you, that we may know the way you've worked with your people throughout the ages, Lord, and knowing that we're a part of that story as well. That these are not just people of ancient past, but these are our brothers and sisters in Christ. And we thank you for letting us hear their story and the way that you've worked through them. And I pray that it would challenge us, that it would confront us, that it would convict us, that it would cause us to be people who love you and follow you, and just realize, remembering Paul saying all these people in the Old Testament were given to us as an example. I pray that you would help us to catch the lesson that it is that you're teaching us through the prophet Jeremiah and these others. So I pray that you give us wisdom tonight as we look into it. I pray these things in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so I'll start with you guys then. So in your readings, questions or comments, things that stuck out to you, things like, oh wow moments. We heard one of them earlier, scarecrow in a cucumber patch. So so just those little tidbit things. Which interestingly, like I was, there's been a couple different times, even in my own readings in the past couple weeks, where I've noticed like these major things that the major differences between our cultures, to where when we read something from their culture, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when we apply it from ours. For example, this morning I was reading in Luke, and Jesus said that your eye is the lamp of your body. You ever heard him say that? And it's kind of like, yeah, and it just sounds right, Yeah, your eye's the lamp of your body. And he says if your lamp is dark, then your whole body's in darkness. But if it's lit, then your whole body will show forth, right? And it's like, okay. And I was sitting there beside my lamp, looking at it. It's like, what? I don't think I know what he's talking about. It's like sometimes you assume, and then I just started thinking of like, what would a lamp been like in their culture?
Small.
How would it have been lit? Oil, right? It had to have an outward source. The light had to come from somewhere else, and it was put on the lamp, and the lamp displayed what it was given, right? You receive the light and you display the light. He said that's why your eye is the lamp of the body. What you receive, you display. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're receiving light, represented in knowledge and purity and glory of God, if you're receiving light, you'll display light. But if you're receiving darkness, what will you display? Darkness, right? And the difference is that, like, for them, the lamp had to receive it and display it. When we see a lamp, we think that the lamp has the source of light within itself, right? Just turn it on, and it's a light source. The difference for them was a lamp was not a source of light, it was a conduit of light, right? It was given light to display it. So just seeing those little differences of like culture sometimes can, if you just step back and think for a second, like when they hear this word, what were they thinking? Because it may have been very different than the way we think about it. So anyways, that has nothing to do with Jeremiah, just giving you a little tidbit for future studies. So, anyways, for you guys, what do you have?
One thing I noticed was the timing that he uses, 70 years in captivity. That's enough for a completely new generation,
right,
to be raised and then put back into Israel.
So
like this would be a generation that has absolutely no idea where they came from being back in. So it's kind of like almost like a factory reset in a sense.
It really is, and the Lord's very intentional in that, because I think you had to have a generation and a half gone, because they were so wicked that like they were not following the Lord, and there was no hope for them. Like, remember we talked about that in Chronicles, where he said there came a time when there was no remedy, right? And for that generation, there was no remedy. So it's interesting whenever you think of it in that sense, that can you imagine growing up? I mean, let's say they've been in captivity now for 20 years, and then you have a kid, right? And maybe you had seen Israel, you'd seen the Promised Land, you've been to the temple, right? But you've been here for 20 years. He's never been to the temple. He's never seen it. He doesn't know anything about that. And then you raise up your son and you're telling him why it is that we're here. Why it is that we don't fit in to this place. Why it is that we're treated differently. And he would have to explain to your son where we came from, why we're here, and where we're headed. So it's really interesting whenever you read, whenever a lot of these books were actually written, it was during exile. Like Chronicles and Kings, all these places, a lot of them, they were written during the exile to teach that generation you're talking about. This is why we're here. And when we get back, you need to remember these things, Don't fall into the same traps that we did, that our forefathers did, that we did, right? So like Daniel, for instance, when we get to him, Daniel, he's one of the few that like he saw the temple and then he would live all the way up through those 70 years. And once the 70 years were completed, he's the one that realizes it. And that's in Daniel 9. That's when he starts praying, like, Lord, wow, it's been 70 years, and Babylon just ended, just like you said it would. And now it's time for us to go back. But what Daniel noticed was, like, we're not ready. We still have. It's been 70 years, and we still haven't changed. We're still the same. And so he confesses sin and all those things, and just very interesting to see that. So, yeah, 70 years. So, factory reset, right? Same thing with 40 years in the wilderness with Israel. Only 2 of the possibly million people that came out of Egypt actually got to the promised land. Joshua, Caleb. The rest of them died in the wilderness. So he reset them as well. He has ways of doing that, purging his people, but he always has a remnant. So,
was Joshua and Caleb, was that a type or a shadow of Christ, or was that they looked by faith into Canaan?
mm-hmm.
What Moses in the law was unable to do, Christ was able to do through the cross of Calvary.
Very good, yeah.
And it's kind of a thing that I guess, and it goes kind of hand in hand with like what we're reading in worship, is that, and I've said it before, but it's really hit home for me, is soli Deo Gloria. To God alone be the glory.
Yeah.
And that we're called to glorify God.
Mm-hmm.
And that we don't get to steal any of that glory
right
from Him.
Yeah.
And that He is responsible for salvation.
Yeah.
And Ephesians 2:8 and 9.
Mm-hmm.
For by grace you are saved through faith, and that not of yourself, for it is a gift of God.
Yeah.
Not of works, lest any man should boast.
Mm.
And so, that boasting, that's, can't do it. Anyway, and it's stealing the glory from God.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, if we're saying, oh, I'm, this because I mean, not to say that we shouldn't be holy as He is holy.
Right.
Leviticus 19:2. But in the same regard, we don't get to take that glory from God.
No.
He is the one that has redeemed us.
Because and He's our creator, our redeemer, our sustainer. There's nothing that we can do that we could stand and say, that was totally me.
No.
Nothing, because if we stand, it's because He's made us to stand. If we
worship Him.
Yeah, so everything that we are comes from Him.
And so even, like the potter, he's forming. That was kind of his initial indictment in Jeremiah, was 2 things. They worship. They broke the first commandment, essentially.
Right.
Set other gods, but then they worship the creation of their own hands.
Yeah.
So
it isn't like idolatry is us trying, God made us in His image, and idolatry is us trying to return the favor of making God in our image, and you notice that, especially going through the prophets, a lot of the ways in which they were committing idolatry, they were still saying this is Yahweh, like that this is the way God wants us to worship Him, and that's idolatry is making God in our own image, after our own ambitions, after our own desires, after what we think is right, after what we think is important and desirable and everything else. So
Tozer said that, like I said, what you think about God is the most, I'm paraphrasing, but it is the most important thing about you. He goes on to later say that because it's important to know God correctly, as correctly as you can humanly
Right.
But because thinking of him in some other way that he's not, essentially you create an idol.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally, definitely. That's the way it works. So that's why this the potter and the clay is a very. I just love the picture that he gives. The word that came to Jeremiah, chapter 18. Arise and go down to the potter's house, and there I'll let you hear my words. So I went down to the potter's house, and there he was working at his will. And Jeremiah's a great storyteller too. Like you're walking into the room with him, and you walk in and you see this potter at his will fashioning this thing. And he says the vessel he was making was spoiled in the potter's hand. And then he reworked it into another vessel. Something that, he was intending it to be this, but then he reworks it into something else. And he said, as it seemed good to the potter to do. Does the potter not have the right over the clay? Paul uses the same terminology in Romans. How can the potter say to the clay, why have you made me thus, right? Does he not have the right as our creator? And especially in reference to his people here. Because they were spoiled, not in the sense of like a spoiled brat, but they were ruined because of their own sinfulness, their own idolatry. Yet, here's the grace of God in this picture, is that rather than just throwing it away and starting with something new, he reworks it. And it's interesting because what he does there is, whenever he's reworking this, it's showing this picture of redemption for not just for Israel, but for all of us. In the beginning, he made us in his image, and we were good, right? That was Adam and Eve. He made it, and it was very good, he even says, right? But they spoiled themselves, and rather than throwing them out and starting over with something new, he reworks it, refashions it. And he does that with Israel, and he'll do that with us as individuals as well. He reworks the ruined clay that we are. He doesn't throw us away, doesn't cast us to the side. And what you see here, the difference between God and this potter is that God planned all of their reworkings. He knew the spoiling that was going to happen, and it did not foil his plans for what the church was supposed to be, but it came into that was his intention all along. So that I believe it's so that whenever you see these ruined, spoiled pieces of clay that he reworks, that you recognize his grace and his power to do such. So it's just such a great picture for us in seeing him. And he says, "O house of Israel, can I not do this as the potter's done?" declares the Lord. But here's what has to happen. He says, verse 7, "If at any time I declare concerning a nation or a kingdom that I'll pluck up and break down and destroy it, and if that nation concerning which I've spoken turns from its evil, I will relent of the disaster that I intended to do to it." Can you think of any time in Scripture where he does that?
Wait a minute. Say that again.
Can you think of any time in the Bible where in verse 8 he says, if that nation that has done evil that he intends to break up, to destroy, turns from its evil, and that he relented of the disaster that he intended to do to it?
Jonah.
There you go. Nineveh, Jonah, right? God said, I want you to go speak out against it. And Jonah, the very reluctant prophet, goes and preaches maybe the shortest sermon in history. 40 days and Nineveh will be no more. That's all he says. He didn't say why. He didn't say that God and Yahweh was doing this. He just said, y'all dead. You're going to be destroyed. Right? Just this pronouncement of judgment against them. He doesn't really even say where it comes from, but they hear it, and probably because they know where he came from, they knew who was behind it, and they actually do repent. And the Lord relents of the disaster that he said was going to happen, right? So that, I mean, God does this often, and this is his point, is like, just because it's spoiled doesn't mean that it can't be reworked, you know? And that's, I want you to remember that whenever you're preaching into really broken people, you know? That just because it's spoiled at the moment, you know, you don't say what it's not. You don't say like, oh no, it's fine. You know, it can still be used as a spoon. I don't know. Yeah,
abstract art.
Yeah, abstract art. There you go. You don't. I mean, you call it for what it is. It's spoiled. You know, it's ruined, but it's not done. And you know, people that you're going to be dealing with addictions ministry and stuff like that. That's how they are going to be. They make a total mess of their life, right? They destroy their reputation. They do all these things, but that does not mean that God is done with them. In fact, it could be that they're just now worked down to a place where he can actually begin using them. You know, they have to be destroyed of all their pride and all of their success and all of the names behind their name. They have to be rid of that. And then he's able to rework it, you know. So being able to give this hope into people's lives of like, just because you're spoiled doesn't mean, just because you're ruined doesn't mean you can't be redeemed, you know. So just remember this picture when on those people, maybe even in your own life, but especially those who you're going to be coming in contact with, that they are in every essence ruined. Doesn't mean they can't be redeemed, you know. There's still breath, there's still hope. So sometimes I think we're quick to give up on people. And I'm just really glad the Lord didn't do that with me. You know, that he didn't quit on me, that he didn't just throw me to the side and say, well, that one's ruined.
The Hound of Heaven.
Oh, man. Oh, Hound of Heaven. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard the Hound of Heaven poem? I'll get it during break. Remind me.
No, I read past it. There was something else that I do blacksmithing as a hobby, so it kind of caught my attention, was refining metal. And that's what he referred to constantly. And the reason why that stuck out to me is I always remembered it was a really short story where a kid asked a blacksmith, you know, what is salvation? And he explains to the kid that you take this big old yellow rock, which ends up being gold ore, they put it into a pot, and all the impurities come up and they scrape off all the impurities. And even if there's a little bit of gold, there's value. But how you know that the gold is finished is when the refiner can see his reflection in the gold.
That's good. Yeah, I like that.
But
getting rid of that dross.
I literally just read it. It's in there somewhere. But
That's all right. It's okay. All right. So let's move through it a little bit then, unless y'all had something else you wanted to particularly bring up. I want us to go kind of through, we're not going to go verse by verse, but I do want to go through some of his persecutions, how he deals with it, and also like the false prophets and why the false prophets would come up, and how to address that. And then I do want to look at the the promises of the new covenant and some of the distinctives thereof. So let's go to chapter 20. We'll start there. And there is a priest named Pashur, the son of Emer, who was chief officer in the house of the Lord. And he heard Jeremiah prophesying these things. Then Pashur beat Jeremiah and put him in the stocks that were in the upper Benjamin gate of the house of the Lord. See what preaching truth can get you sometimes. You know, stuck in the stocks, right? In prison. This is what often happens throughout the Bible, and it continues to happen throughout our history as well. That whenever somebody hears something they don't want to hear, they just assume you're doing something illegal. It doesn't happen today, though, does it? Right? I ain't trying to get political, But like there is. This is what people do today as well. I remember probably 5 or 6 years ago, had a team of friends go up to Canada to do some scouting for mission work, and already at that point, if you preached from your pulpit that homosexuality was a sin, they threw you in jail. Canada. Like, it was a hate crime to do that. That was 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago in Canada. So, some of the things that were just passed in these United States, it's probably going to cause the same things to happen here. You'd be fined, eventually probably in prison, stuff like that. And that's just one. I mean, I'm not like, a basher on these things or anything like that. Like, it's just one area. As soon as you start, at a certain point, the Orthodox Christian faith in general is going to be a hate crime to speak. Because not only are you declaring, adultery as sin, homosexuality as sin, you're declaring that their version of truth is a sin and that it's wrong. Like, the gospel is offensive, and most of the time when people are offended, they just try to do away with it, and that's what Pasteur does here, because he hears the indictment on him, and rather than listen and reason and look to Scripture, he just looks to his own field. He just says, "I'm throwing you in prison," right? So, happens. And the next day, when Pasteur released Jeremiah from the stocks, verse 3, Jeremiah says to him, "The Lord doesn't call your name Pasteur, but terror on every side. For thus says the Lord, behold, I'll make you a terror to yourself and to all your friends. They shall fall by the sword of their enemies while you look on, and I'll give all Judah into the hand of the king of Babylon. He'll carry them captive to Babylon, and shall strike them down with the sword. Moreover, I'll give all the wealth of the city, all its grains, all its prized belongings, all the treasures of the kings of Judah into the hand of their enemies, who shall plunder them and seize them and carry them off to Babylon. And you, Pasteur, and all who dwell in your house shall go into captivity to Babylon. There you shall go, and there you shall die, and there you shall be buried, you and all your friends to whom you've prophesied falsely." Zing!
I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to make you wish I did.
Now, thoughts right now on Jeremiah after saying, like, after what he just went through there. What are your thoughts on him?
He's a lot easier to read than Isaiah.
Okay, yeah. Him as a person. After reading that passage alone, the fact that he's preaching, gets imprisoned, and once he gets out, man, he just lets him have it. Faith, right?
I mean, initially in Isaiah it says, like the opening verses, the Lord says,
Don't be afraid of
them.
It's like verse 4.
Do not be afraid of their faces, for I am with you to deliver you, says the Lord. So, I mean, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. And he heard the Word of God, believed the Word of God, and is standing on that faith of Scripture.
What's interesting here is that outwardly you see this great boldness and courage and faith. But you get to the next verse, and you see this great inward turmoil within him. Listen to what right after he says this, we'd be amen, and you give it to that dude, man. And then the next verse, verse 7, it becomes prayer. So that was proclamation, public proclamation, and now here comes the private prayer. What's going on within him internally? "Oh Lord, you've deceived me." You have deceived me, and I was deceived. You're stronger than I, and you've prevailed. I've become a laughingstock all the day. Everyone mocks me. For whenever I speak, I cry out, I shout violence and destruction. For the word of the Lord has become for me a reproach and derision all day long. He is lost in that moment. He's confessing to the Lord of the confidence that he's lost in his calling. What did I sign up for? You've deceived me, Lord. And this is one of the many reasons why I love the Word of God, because of the honesty that's in it. You know, it seems like every other religion, like the prophets and the holy men written within their books are so courageous and there's no issues with them, but the Lord very quickly shows us the faults and the fears and the frustrations of his people, yet he doesn't turn away from them. He uses them still. This being one of those examples. Yeah.
14 through 18, is he quoting Job?
We will get there in a second. Yes. So, we'll pop over there. It sounds a lot like it, though. Cursed be the day on which I was born.
Well, there's a lot of that in Job.
Yeah. He's definitely got that feel to it. Which is, interestingly, you know, Job was... Most scholars will tell you that Job was actually the first book of the Bible written. That it was written before Moses. That it was actually written during the days of the patriarchs. Because, you know, Moses was the one used to write Genesis, Exodus, you know, the law, the Torah. But Job was written during the time probably of Abraham and those guys. So it had been around for a long time. So it's interesting that the first book that God's people were probably given was one about the sovereignty of God over their suffering. So I'd say it's something that for every good Jew was really imprinted onto their conscience, that we will suffer, but God is sovereign over it. You know, it's very interesting to think about when you see their history of suffering constantly. But Job also serves as this interesting thing for us in that the most beloved vessels of the Lord are the ones who suffer the most. As the ones that he chooses. Have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him in all the earth? You know, God was the one who initiated his trials for Job. Satan didn't come up to him and say, "Let me have Job." Satan comes up to the Lord, and the Lord says, "Have you considered Job?" He's the one who initiates it. You know? And it's not because he's mad at Job. He loves Job. Right? It's not that Job's done anything wrong. It's that he loves Job. And he's getting Job to see something that he couldn't see if he was just surrounded by earthly blessings. You know, Satan was right when he said to the Lord, well, he's right for many people. He wasn't right of Job, but his accusation that he makes of Job was like, he only loves you because you put a hedge all around him, because you bless him at every turn. You know, and while that wasn't true, that didn't prove to be true of Job, which I think was the Lord's point. It does prove true for many other people that once the blessing is taken away, they curse the Lord. You know. But Jeremiah, back to him, he has this internal struggle because this is not a glamorous ministry. This is a hard ministry that he's dealing with here. Having to tell people that, man, a lot of your friends are going to die. A lot of you're going to be taken captive. This place is going to be ruined. He did not take joy in that. I don't think he took joy in telling people you're going to die. You know, and I think that serves us well, that when we are speaking of judgment, there needs to be some sorrow and anguish within our souls as we're speaking it. Not this, "Hey, well, they're all going to hell." Do you like that voice? That was nice.
Yeah,
that was a good.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need to be joyous in that sense. Ezekiel will point out to this fact that the Lord doesn't delight in the death of his enemies even. So whenever we speak of judgment, Jeremiah's showing us that, like, this is not hey, Jeremiah, what do you do for a living? I just go around and tell people that they're going to be destroyed by Babylonians. It's great. He doesn't, it's a hard ministry, and preaching truth is a hard ministry, and it can be very daunting, especially when people don't receive it. Especially the ones who really should be able to. Some of the hardest people that you will deal with in ministry are those who are within the very walls of the church. It's not the new Christians that I have the most trouble with. It's the ones who have been around for 60 years, who don't want to hear truth. They just want to hear their tradition. Pastor is one of these.
And I don't know how, in the vision that the Lord gave Jeremiah, what that extent of that was, or but anyway, what you're talking about, there shouldn't be no joy in bringing judgment or whatever. I think anybody who's ever felt the weight of sin and the terror of the Lord, the true terror of the Lord,
right.
not, and maybe that's not a tangible thing that people can understand unless it's just, I don't know, been thrust in their face, and just, and the Lord just lets you and how internally, and then your soul, just how that, the nightmarish hell that can feel like.
Yeah.
And then to know that you would have to pronounce that same judgment that you felt
on somebody else.
You don't want to do that because you've been. It's like when I was saying that one time about, have you ever had a girl break your heart?
Yeah.
And then you got into another relationship and you didn't want to because you felt.
You know what it felt like, so you didn't want to be the one to inflict the pain. Yeah.
Same principle. There.
Yeah.
That's what.
No, I feel you.
Like, that's the last thing. If you've ever felt it, that's the last thing you want to do to anybody.
Yeah. And sometimes,
you might have to, but
Yeah.
I'm saying, but it's not.
Yeah. There's a necessity laid upon us to preach the whole counsel of God, and there are some things for us that are more palatable for people to digest, and more things that are easier for us to speak. And this is one reason I'll touch on this in the next class, but in worship we'll talk a little bit tonight about expository preaching and what that is and why it's necessary. And what that is preaching the whole counsel of God, showing forth what the Word clearly says, all of it. Not the thing. If you're a topical preacher, you can preach on. You can just pick and choose whatever it is, and then say, "Oh, the Lord laid on my heart," and it's really just things that are easier for you to say. And in my circle of people that I know, most topical preachers, they usually will declare things and preach things that the people in their congregation agree with and want to hear and probably say themselves. A lot of the guys that I'm around, they're at my church. I love them, and some of them probably listening on here actually because they wanted to kind of take the class as well. And I've had some of them talk to me about, like, how do you navigate through this time right now in our country of all the turmoil and chaos and all these different things. And a lot of pastors I know would try to foot their way around that and tell them some things they wanted to hear, of like, oh, well, God's still got his hand on this nation, he's going to bless us, because we bless Israel, so we're going to be blessed. And I'll let we have a lot of that stuff going on, and it's easier just to kind of go with the flow. But what I'm called to do as a pastor is not to go with the flow, but expose what our hearts are in this. And it doesn't give me pleasure to have to kind of confront in those times and say, like, listen, your hope is not in these United States of America. Like, it doesn't matter who's in the Oval Office. Like, unless the Lord builds the house, its builders build in vain. And you can't make the argument anymore that he's building this house.
Why would he?
Well, and what I usually tell people is like, listen, God's already got a holy nation. It's called the church. And our aim is not to make America the church, but to bring America into the church. There is a nuance there, a slight nuance. Like, our job as Christians is to see His kingdom come. Not for this to become His kingdom, but for His kingdom to come into this place. There's a difference in saying that, because our great hope, the great hope of the world, is not the U.S. government. It's the church. That's the holy nation, the true Israel. We are the light of the world. We're talking earlier about the lamp, the eye and stuff like that. Like, so we've been placed as a city on a hill. That's us. It's not a country here on this earth. It's a heavenly country. But that I guess the thing that I'm getting at is that kind of breaks down. And same for Pasher, this guy. Like, he was very nationalistic when it came to Israel. Like, we're never going to have any issues because God blesses us. And Jeremiah's like, you wrong, man. You're wrong. That's like, you and all your friends to whom you prophesy falsely, y'all are going into Babylon. We've, in the past 6 months, I can't tell you how many stinking prophecies I heard saying that, hey, Donald Trump's he's going to be president. God has said it. He is going to be president for these next 4 years. Right? Wrong.
Is that a false prophecy?
That was a false prophecy, and the church was inundated with it, man. Mm-hmm. Believers just, the tower's going to rise back up out of the ashes and all that stuff. It's false. Call it out, man. It was false. It was because they confused Christianity with this American patriotism, and they thought that conservative American patriotism was equal to biblical Christianity, and it's not. It's actually in opposition to it, because you become so self-focused that you forget about the mandate we've been given to go and make disciples of not just America, but all nations. And you've forgotten that you're a citizen of the kingdom of God, first and foremost. Now, we'll get to how we live that out in our life in chapter 29 here in a few minutes. But, man, don't buy into that junk. Like, I don't know what America's future is. I don't. But I know what the church's is. And it's glory, man. It's good, So I'm not putting my hope and my stock in what we are here. And I'm not going to get fearful and panicked over what I'm seeing happen before my eyes, because I realize that these things, Jesus said, must happen. Right? So, sorry, got on my soapbox there. I will step down off my soapbox.
I remember my pastor upset a lot of people when he said, they're like, oh, small groups, is there anything we can pray for and stuff like that? And he goes, well, how about we start by praying for our president?
Yeah.
That, if you really want to make some people angry, do that, because they're like, oh, we don't want to pray for Biden. And then people kind of are like, hey, and he goes, well, let's take a look at the Bible. It says right here, God raises and lowers leaders.
Yeah.
And if Biden is appointed by God, then we should pray for him.
Yep.
That makes a lot of people angry.
Yeah, because he's ungodly. Okay, so we don't pray for ungodly people. We don't pray for their salvation. Yeah.
There's a lot of ungodly leaders in the world here.
Right.
It doesn't make a difference whether or not it's ours.
Yeah, I was thinking about 1 Peter 2, verse 13, where it says, be subject to the Lord for the Lord's sake, to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good, you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free. You are free. But not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. He says, honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, and here's the kicker, honor the emperor. Now, the emperor in this time,
Nero?
it was probably Nero, who had blamed the Christians for the great fire of Rome. And many of them were locally persecuted and killed because of it. This is the same emperor who would impale them on sticks, light them on fire so that his guests at his garden parties could see clearly at night. And he says, honor them. Right? I remember somebody, when President Obama was in office, I said, we need to pray for him. We need to honor him. We don't need to, yeah. I remember saying, and they were like, dude, I don't think the Lord would intend for us to honor such men like that. Do you not realize oh, I know. Do you not realize how evil and wicked he is? And I said, well, I don't know that he's more evil or wicked than Nero. And we were told, like the Christians were told, to honor Nero. Pray for him. Right? So if that's true of that wicked man, then I'm sure it's true of any wicked man or woman that may come into office. Right? And because Peter's point is like, you need to live as kingdom citizens and look different than everybody else, because there's enough of the other side who cast down whenever somebody that we voted for gets in office, right? And they will often stomp the streets and all that different stuff. So we need to be completely different than that. Not to say that like, okay, yay, we've got liberal Democrat in office who, is doing these gender equality things. Yay, great policies. I'm not saying that. But like, I'm still going to call him President Biden. He's my president. He represents this country, whether for good or for bad. And I'm called to honor him. I'm called to pray for him. And that's what I'm going to do. But I'm also, just like Jeremiah and others, just like I did with Trump, President Trump, I will call out sin. But there's still a way of calling out sin, but still honoring somebody. There's a fine balance in that. And I think that's something we probably need to learn, because just because you honor somebody doesn't mean that you don't speak the truth to them. But you were told by Paul to speak the truth in love. There's a way of doing it right, and there's a way of doing it very wrongly. So, anyways, back over to Jeremiah, struggling with his calling, saying, "You've deceived me, Lord, and here I am in the midst of this season in which, like, everybody's laughing. I'm the laughing stock. Everyone mocks me." And verse 9 of chapter 20, he says, "Okay, if I say in my heart, I'm not even going to mention him, talking about the Lord. I'm not going to speak any more in his name." He says, if I did that, he says, "There is in my heart, as it were, a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I'm weary with holding it in, and I cannot." He wants to run, but he can't. He doesn't want to speak, but all he can do is proclaim. And I think that's the struggle of the Christian minister. Like, there are things sometimes that you would rather not say, that may be uncomfortable at points. But this calling is without repentance. And Jeremiah knows, like, man, if I just said, I'm just going to go mow lawns, I'm not doing this anymore, he said, I'd be miserable. I couldn't do it. My pastor, he's said that many times. Like, he'll say it from the pulpit sometimes. He'll say, like, there's a lot of days I just want to go mow grass. I don't want to keep doing this. But he says, but if I did, man, I would be, as Paul said, of all men most pitiable, right? Like, woe is me if I don't preach the gospel.
Which chapter was that?
This is chapter 20. What are you talking about for For Jeremiah? Yeah.
No, I was
Yeah.
a little ahead.
You're fine. To keep reading on that, he says in verse 10, he says, I hear many whispering terrors on every side. Denounce him. Let us denounce him, say all my close friends watching from my fall. Perhaps he'll be deceived, and then we can overtake him and take our revenge on him. People were attacking not only his message, but himself. These are some big struggles. Because again, I'm trying to take you through like this ministry aspect of Jeremiah, because he in the Old Testament, I mean all of the Old Testament leaders, saints, prophets, like whenever they go through some major issues with people not wanting to follow them, people speaking against them, people wanting them out, people wanting them killed. It's the same deal in the New Testament, and it'll be the same for you. Whatever ministry that it is that the Lord calls you into, when you become a leader, man, you get a bullseye on your back. That's the way the world works, and unfortunately, even our churches have worldly men and women in there that all they want to see is your destruction. So that could make you really want to run. You know, and most guys that hey, Cody, man, I really feel called to ministry. I always try to talk them out of it. And you're like, Cody, why would you try to talk somebody out of ministry? Because if I can talk you out of it, anybody can first. But if I can talk you out of it, the Lord didn't call you into it. That's the difference. So I'm going to tell you all the honest things, all the struggles, all the pain, all the people who make you just want to run. I'll tell you about it. But I'll also tell you about the great joy it is to serve the King of Kings and to fulfill the calling that He's laid on my life. But I'll tell you truth, and you see it here in Jeremiah. Like, I wish I could not speak, but I can't. I've got to. Paul, woe is me if I don't preach the gospel. And here's what really keeps us going, and what kept Jeremiah going in the midst of his losing of confidence, the midst of his attacks, all these different things. He says in verse 11, but the Lord is with me as a dread warrior. Therefore my persecutors will stumble. They won't overcome me. They will be greatly shamed. They will not succeed. Their eternal dishonor will never be forgotten. O Lord of hosts, who tests the righteous, who sees the heart and the mind, let me see your vengeance upon them. To you have I committed my cause. Sing to the Lord, praise the Lord, for He has delivered the life of the needy from the hand of evildoers. So this is where you speak truth in, and Jeremiah's doing that here. He's telling the Lord how he feels. You've deceived me. What have you got me into, right? And he lays the issues before the Lord's feet of they're trying to kill me, they mock me. But then he speaks that truth. But you're with me as a warrior. You are surrounding me. To you belongs praise. You have delivered my life, and you will deliver my life. Judgment will come. Like, he speaks those truths, and that you have to do the same thing. Because if you listen to your feelings, you will not make it in ministry. You won't make it in the Christian life, period, if all you do is listen to your feelings. Because your feelings accuse you. Your feelings will often cause you to doubt what God has said. Now, your feelings can sometimes be really good things, but they can be very deceptive. Jeremiah will mention that later on, that the heart is deceptively wicked above all things, and who can know it? Well, the Lord can, but you can't. Sometimes you lie to yourself and you deceive yourself more than you do to anybody else, because you're trying to hide these certain things about you, right? But don't trust your feelings all the time. Don't trust your emotions all the time, because they'll always lead you to self-preservation, which means you will run and you'll do the easy things and not the hard things. So, I think Jeremiah 20 and also a lot of what you see him going through is just very practical for us as men and women who who are serving the Lord in any ministry position, in any leadership position, in any teaching position, you're going to feel these things. But you need to speak these things back into yourself, like the truth of what God says. So, let's skip ahead a little bit to 26. Continuing through this persecution. Yeah.
It's probably not word, but like speaking truth into your life through the Word of God. As a man thinks, so he is. That's with it. But if you're preaching the truth of God's Word into your life, that I don't know, it becomes a reality. If that makes you're.
No, you're right on.
I don't know where I was.
A passage I often go back to in this idea of like preaching truth into yourself would be Psalm 42 and 43.
I hope that term doesn't sound trendy.
What's that?
Preaching truth into yourself.
No, that's.
But.
But speak your own truth is trendy.
Yeah.
That's a trendy phrase, but like speaking God's truth into yourself, not so much. But this is an example of somebody preaching the truth of God into themselves. Literally preaching to themselves. Psalm 42 and 43, he repeats this phrase in verse 5 of chapter 42, and verse 11, and then verse 5 again in chapter 43. He says, "Why are you cast down, O my soul?" Speaking to his own soul, speaking to himself, speaking to his inner thoughts, his inner feelings, his inner emotions. He says, "Why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall yet praise him, my salvation and my God." So he asks, he talks to himself, right? Why are you upset? Why are you cast down? Put your hope in God. Why? Because I will again praise him. There's a future. So a few things he preaches to himself. There's always a future for God's people. I will again praise him. And there's always deliverance and salvation for his people. My salvation. And we have this eternal God who sees beyond our present circumstances. Speaks truth, right? There's a lot of things going on in his life, like my soul's cast down within me. Therefore, like all of these things are going on in my heart. But then he just keeps asking, "Why are you down? Why are you feeling this way, Cody? Hope in God. You will praise him again. There's always a future for God's people. He is your salvation. He's always your salvation. He will deliver you, and he is always with you." Speak truth, right? Speak God's truth into your life, not your own truth. That's the difference between the trendy Instagram, posts or something. Like, speak your own truth.
Joy comes in the morning.
Joy comes in the morning. Yeah, there is a hope and a future for God's people always. Jeremiah 26. I'm trying to take you through his ministry a little bit, like his persecutions and things that are happening within him. In chapter 26, he says, "In the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, this word came from the Lord. Thus says the Lord, stand in the court of the Lord's house and speak to all the cities of Judah that come to worship in the house of the Lord, all the words that I command you to them. Don't hold back a word." And what he preaches there, if you remember, is what we saw in chapter 7. Remember I told you to mark those two together? Chapter 7 gives you what he speaks right here. And it was rough and tumble. If you remember, it's basically just speaking to the evil of the land. Everything that's going wrong. Them trusting these deceptive words. Remember, this is the temple, this is the temple, this is the temple. Remember them saying that? He says, don't trust in that. Him calling out the idolatry, the abominations, and the burnt offerings up to Molech. All those things. You remember that? That's what he speaks back here. So The Lord tells him, again, 26:2, he says, don't hold back a word. Verse 3, it may be that they'll listen, and every one of them turn from his way, and then I'll relent of the disaster that I intended to do to them because of their evil deeds. You shall say to them, thus says the Lord, if you won't listen to me, to walk in my law that I've set before you, and to listen to the words of my servants, the prophets, whom send you urgently, though you've not listened, then I will make this house like Shiloh, and I'll make this city a curse for all the nations of the earth. So, how did they respond to Jeremiah's big sermon from chapter 7? It says, the priests and the prophets and all the people heard Jeremiah speaking these words in the house of the Lord. And when he'd finished speaking all the Lord commanded him to speak, then the priests and the peoples and all the people laid hold of him, saying, you shall die. Now, I've probably laid some stinkers when it comes to sermons, but I've never had anybody say, you're going to die, you know. Everybody, I mean, he didn't have any, like, and this, you can start seeing why he was saying to the Lord, like, you've deceived me, you know, because the Lord said right before this, you know, it may be that they'll listen. You know, he gives them this hope, this optimistic hope that maybe they'll listen, and then none of them do. You know, so you can definitely see why Jeremiah is feeling those ways, right? And you shall die. Why? He said, have you prophesied in the name of the Lord, saying, this house shall be like Shiloh, and this city shall be desolate without inhabitant. And all the people gathered around Jeremiah in the house of the Lord. Do you see the picture in your mind's eye? Of this one man proclaiming the truth of God and everyone standing against him, surrounding him. And when the officials heard it, they came up from the king's house to the house of the Lord and took their seat in the entry of the new gate of the Lord. And the priests and the prophets said to the officials and all the people, this man deserves the sentence of death because he's prophesied against this city, as you've heard with your own ears. Then Jeremiah spoke to all the officials and said, the Lord sent me to prophesy against this house and this city, all the words you've heard. Now therefore, mend your ways and your deeds and obey the voice of the Lord your God, and the Lord will relent of this disaster that he's pronounced against you. But as for me, behold, I'm in your hands. Do with me as seems good and right to you. Only know for certain that if you put me to death, you'll bring innocent blood upon yourselves and this city and its inhabitants. For in truth, the Lord sent me to speak all these words in your ears. It reminds me, Martin. Martin Luther, whenever he was being tried for heresy before the Roman Catholic Church, he made a massive statement, if you remember, and at the very end of it, he said something very similar. He says, "This is the truth of God, and behold, like here I stand, I can do no other. So help me God." So it kind of ends that same way of like, I've got to speak what is true and what is right, and do with me whatever you want, but I'm going to speak what's right and what's true in God's sight. So why is it then, do you think, that they hated his message so much? Why is it that they couldn't get it? It's something to think through. They keep saying he's prophesying against this house, against this city. It shows you one of the major things that they're deceiving themselves with, and that is that they, just because they are the people of God and are in the place of God, that they will not receive the judgment of God. And I think they hate it so much because it's exposing the fact that they don't have the love of God within them. And again, there's so many parallels for us today of people who think that nothing bad is going to happen to us because we're a Christian nation, or because we're part of this denomination or that denomination. we deceive ourselves into thinking that just because we stand in God's place, we're part of God's people, that we won't receive the judgment of God. So for them here, it's very clear that their hatred is spewing up from the reality, probably, that they knew they were in sin but didn't want to recognize it. I was asking the question of, like, why is it, do you think, that they hated this message so much?
Because people don't like being told they're not in control.
So that control aspect, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, I look at it from all the way from the beginning of this illusion of being God, the idea of being God. And that's all really, if you have to do something in order to get to heaven, then that makes you in charge, in a sense.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden God comes along and puts you back in your place, explaining to you that you're not actually in control. I am. Nobody likes to hear that. I mean, that's the American dream, isn't it? Is to have the newest thing, be better than all your friends, be rich, be powerful.
Yeah. Very true.
Hasn't really changed too much in the past thousands or so years.
No, we keep reliving the same sordid dreams.
Majorities usually go with groupthink. True. As far as, like,
yeah.
I mean, it's easier to, even if you're wrong, if there's a lot of you who are wrong, it's, does that make sense?
That's the mob mentality.
Right.
We have a lot of that now.
Mobs don't think off of reason. They only think off. They don't react from reason. They don't make decisions based on reason. They make it based on feeling.
Yeah.
What's in their belly? What's in their gut? That's why it's hard to control a mob.
Right.
You can't just, men, be reasonable. No, you're you're dead. Yeah, they'll trample you. You can't control a mob because they can't control themselves. They can't control their own feelings. They can't confront their own errors. They can't receive truth. All they're doing is going based upon what they feel, that gut, which is why, in many, what we, I won't go into that. Never mind. All right, real quick. All right. Whenever you think about different types of, oh wow, this is still from last week, huh? Whenever you think about different types of government, there are three types, right? So you have a monarchy, which is the one over many. But then, what's another type of government? Not the one over the many, but not a monarchy, but maybe a
Democracy.
Democracy will be one, yeah. Democracy, and I'll describe. Democracy is the many over the many. But then you also have like an oligarchy, which is the few over many. And
Politburo.
What's that?
The Soviet Politburo.
Yeah, so a lot of communist socialist states are like this, and the few are usually the richest, the most powerful members of the state, right? And they give out their little bread and nuggets of food to the poor masses, right? So the problem with all this is a cycle of revolution. So if you have one over the many, what happens when that one becomes corrupt? Well, you have a few under him that overthrow him and say, we should rule. So it goes into an oligarchy. But then, if you've got, here it's the same deal. If you've got a good king, that's great. Problem is, there are no good men, right? So it's impossible. There'll be something wrong with this one to make the many overthrow him and give their control over to a few, right? This is the revolution that happens. So the oligarchy happens. So the rule of the few over the many. Yeah, man, we need some socialism here in these United States, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No.
Which is really, that's what this is the rule of the few over many. And in some cases, I feel like we're in this sometimes,
Hey, the other people didn't do it right.
Yeah, that's always the excuse of like,
Venezuela's doing it
yeah,
wrong right
yeah,
now.
Russia got it wrong with, communism, and Venezuela, they're just.
If you want to live in a socialist state, go move to Venezuela. They'd love to have you right
So whenever there comes the recognition of like, why do they get everything? Why is it just a few people that rules over all of us? Then we go to the rule of the many over the many, which is a form democracy, right? So democracy, it's really mob mentality.
50 plus 1.
Yeah. So whatever the masses are feeling, that's what we do. But the problem there is like the masses don't think with reason. They think with feeling. They think with gut.
That's why you have to have a republic.
Right.
That limits the many.
The
many over the few.
I'm glad you brought up the Republic, because that's where I get this from, is actually Plato's Republic. This is what and Plato, who is not a Christian, what for all practical purposes was somewhat form of an atheist or agnostic at best. He didn't believe in the gods of Greek and Romans and all this different stuff. But he did believe in the Logos, this inanimate, impersonal reason behind everything that created everything. That's why when John says, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, that it reached such a wide audience, because they knew Logos, but then they find out that the Logos was not impersonal, but a person, and that he became flesh. Mind-boggling, right? But Plato's whole argument was like, you're never going to have a perfect government here, because no matter if it's one or a few or many, it's all made of men, and men are corrupt. So you'll continue to have these vicious revolutions happen over and over and over again. But he did say, he had this ideal of the just city. Like, of what would be the perfect city, the perfect nation, the perfect righteous people. And he had some weird ideas of what that would be. And one of them was like that it would be this idea of one man, one art. And what that means is, if you're a warrior, then be a warrior, but don't be a warrior and a philosopher. If you're a philosopher, then be a philosopher, but don't be a worker. This servant class sort of thing. So, you can't, don't mix those things, because it's not fair to the person, and it's not fair to the society. But the kicker of his story was, and his idea in all this was, he said, one, I'd like the perfect king of the perfect city. Because in his mind, like, the rule of the one over many would be the perfect scenario if the one was perfect. And he said, what you need for the just city is for a king who is both a philosopher and a warrior, a poet and a warrior. But the irony of that is that he would be taking upon himself the greatest injustice for the good of his people. That he would take on these two roles, and he would be putting on himself this great sacrifice and the greatest work of injustice in order to give his people justice.
I think it was.
Now, what? Who is that?
Christ.
That's Christ. He didn't, and then it was like 250 years before Jesus came,
Right.
and he was just like, "This is what it would be like," and that's what it would be. Go ahead.
I think it was his student that said you can't have. He said the opposite. He said you can't have warriors that don't read, and you can't have politicians that don't fight, because then you'll have your decisions made by cowards and your fighting done by fools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is interesting how the
The warriors that can't read join the United States Marine Corps.
No,
that was a joke. That was a joke.
All right, let's take a quick
Did you
break.
hear about the new flavor of crayons?
No.